A woman with a clipboard marched up and told him to move his boat. Loud, proud, and certain she was in charge. What she didn't know was that the man she was barking at owned the entire lake, and her fishing club's days were numbered. It was just after 7 a.m. when Clarence Rucker backed his truck into the gravel lot at Mayfield Lake outside Springfield, Missouri. The sun was still low, the water glassy and untouched. Clarence, 47, had been looking forward to this morning for weeks, prepping his old aluminum fishing boat the night before. It was supposed to be quiet and peaceful. Just him, a thermos of coffee, and the lake his father used to bring him to as a kid. He was unhitching the trailer when he heard footsteps crunching fast across the gravel. Turning, he saw her. Mid-50s, short blonde hair, sunglasses already perched on her head despite the weak sun. She held a clipboard like a badge of authority and wore a forced smile that never reached her eyes. "You can't park that here," she snapped. Clarence blinked. "I'm sorry?" She marched closer. "This lot is private. Community use only. You need to move that boat." Clarence set his wrench down, stood up slowly. "Morning. You live here?" "I'm on the HOA board," she said proudly. "And you're not on the list of permitted lake users. The lake is restricted to the Mayfield Hills Fishing Club. You're trespassing." Clarence glanced toward the shoreline. Empty, silent, no one else around. Didn't see a sign. "There's one by the pavilion." "You must have missed it," she fired back. Clarence nodded. "I've fished here plenty of times. Never had a problem." "Well, you've got one now," she said, tapping her pen on the clipboard. "Either move your boat or I call this in." Clarence took a breath. "What's your name?" "Teresa Holcomb." "And yours?" "Clarence Rucker." She scribbled it down like she was issuing a citation. "That boat registered to you?" "It is." "Then you should know the rules. This area's for residents and their guests under supervision. We've had issues with people leaving trash and breaking things." The way she said people rubbed Clarence wrong. She had already decided what kind of man he was. He kept his voice even. "I'm not breaking anything. Just trying to enjoy the water." "You need to pack up and leave now," she snapped. Clarence looked at the gravel, then back at the lake. "You sure you want to push this?" "Excuse me?" "You might want to double-check your information. I think you're mistaken about who owns this lake." She laughed, sharp and shrill. "Is that supposed to intimidate me? Do you know how long I've lived here?" Clarence didn't flinch. "Do you know who purchased this lake 3 years ago? Who maintains it, pays taxes on it? Who signed off on your fishing club's access in the first place?" For a second, her face faltered, then hardened again. "You're bluffing." Clarence clipped the line back onto his boat. "All right. You do what you have to do," she smirked. "You'll be hearing from the board." But Clarence wasn't bluffing, and Teresa had just picked the wrong fight. By 9 o'clock, Clarence was already drifting near the reeds on the eastern side of the lake. Line cast, the water calm. But peace didn't last. A white golf cart buzzed toward the dock. He didn't need a closer look. Same posture, same brisk movements. Teresa Holcomb. This time she wasn't alone. A man in a windbreaker with a radio on his belt sat beside her, likely a contracted security guard. They stopped at the dock and Teresa planted her feet wide, voice booming. "Clarence Rucker, this is your final warning. You are in violation of HOA regulations. Leave immediately." Clarence reeled in his line slowly, turned in his chair and waved. "Morning again, Teresa." She announced she had contacted the sheriff. The guard beside her looked unsure, whispering something, but she cut him off. Clarence stayed calm. "That man with you, he got a badge or just a walkie?" Teresa stiffened. "You don't need to worry about that." "Well," Clarence called back, "if you're going to accuse someone of trespassing, you might want to make sure you're not the one trespassing first." The guard finally spoke. "Sir, can I ask what your business is on the lake?" Clarence nodded. "Fishing. Are you a resident of Mayfield Hills?" "No." "Then I'll have to ask you to come ashore." Clarence leaned back. "Ever hear of Crescent Holdings?" The guard frowned. "Can't say I have." "Figures. They're a private trust. Bought this lake and land 3 years ago. Owned and managed by them." "I'm the sole trustee," Teresa scoffed. "You expect us to believe that?" "Don't really care what you believe," Clarence said. "It's public record. Filed with Greene County. Look it up." The guard shifted uneasily. "Do you have ID?" "In the truck. I'll show it to a deputy when they arrive." "That's who you called, right?" The guard glanced at Teresa, uncertain. She bristled. This lake has been part of our community for decades. Just because some shell company bought it doesn't mean you can barge in and disrupt our peace. Clarence's voice stayed steady. I didn't disrupt anything. You came to me. Her face reddened. Fine. Let the sheriff sort it out. Don't expect sympathy. Clarence cast another line, not looking for sympathy. Just peace and quiet. But for Teresa, it wasn't about rules anymore. It was about control. And she was starting to lose hers. That afternoon, Clarence drove home with the sun beating down, silence filling his truck like a bomb. His modest single-story house sat off a rural road, paint faded, built for living, not for show. His dog barked from the porch as he pulled in. Inside, Clarence dropped his keys and picked up a photo from the shelf. His father barefoot by the lake, grinning with a fish in hand. Clarence, a boy beside him with crooked teeth and grass-stained jeans. Dad, he murmured, you'd have handled her better than I did. He poured iced tea, sat at the table, and thought about the way Teresa looked at him, not asking who he was, just assuming. Finally, he went to the filing cabinet, pulled out a blue folder marked Mayfield Lake, title and access. Inside lay the deed transfer, Crescent Holdings' signature, his own name as trustee, the agreement granting the HOA conditional use of the lake, renewable annually, but lapsed for 10 months. Clarence chuckled. Guess they forgot who they were dealing with. The lake was never public. Access was courtesy, not a right. And now the paperwork gave him every legal standing to revoke it. He didn't want to act on impulse, but this was bigger than one rude woman. It was about respect. Clarence picked up his phone, dialed an old number. Hey, Mr. Lang, it's been a while. I need a favor. Can you pull the HOA agreement file from 3 years ago? Clarence had the physical papers in his hand, but he still called his attorney, asked him to double-check the fishing access clause, said no rush, but it was time he looked closer at who'd been taking advantage of what his father left behind. What he didn't know was just how deep the entitlement ran in that neighborhood, or how loud it would get when someone finally told them no. Monday morning, he drove down to the Greene County Recorder's office. Didn't need to, but he wanted things official, clean, bulletproof. The clerk pulled up the parcel records, and there it was, his name on the deed. Crescent Holdings Trust stamped across the page, the lake, the dock, the entire greenbelt. All his. No overlapping claims, no community rights, no shared easements. The clerk smiled politely and said everything looked in order. Clarence nodded. That was all he needed. When he got back in his truck, he sat for a moment, breathing slow. This wasn't revenge. It was respect. Teresa hadn't just questioned him. She had looked him in the eye and decided he didn't belong. Back home, he opened his laptop and drafted a letter to the Mayfield Hills HOA. Direct, professional, no anger, no threats. He cited the terms of their original agreement, noted no renewal had been filed, and declared access suspended until further notice. He attached scans of the deed, the original contract, his trustee certification airtight from top to bottom. He printed it, sealed it with the supporting papers, and drove it to the HOA office himself. The receptionist looked startled when he handed it over, asked if he wanted a receipt. Clarence told her, just make sure Teresa gets it, then walked out without another word. That evening, he sat on the porch with Jasper at his feet, watching the sun go down, almost peaceful until the phone rang. Unknown number, he answered. A man introduced himself as Ron Castile, acting president of the HOA. They'd received his letter. Ron tried to smooth things over, said maybe there was a miscommunication, maybe they could meet and work out a compromise. Clarence stayed calm. Nothing escalated, he said. The agreement wasn't renewed. Access had been used without permission, and he simply corrected it. Ron pushed back, said revoking access wouldn't sit well with residents. Clarence told him it was time folks learned humility, then hung up. By Wednesday, the ripple was everywhere.
Emails came first, stiff politeness hiding anger.
Then phone calls, numbers he didn't recognize. People he hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted a word. At the hardware store, a man named Billy Waller walked up, oil-stained hands, 20 years in the neighborhood. Said not everyone felt the way Teresa did. She'd always acted like she ran the place. Clarence nodded, appreciated the gesture. At the post office, there was an unsigned note left in his box. She doesn't speak for everyone. At the gas station, a woman waved, then quickly turned away. Some were testing the water, trying to feel him out. Others were stirring the pot. That afternoon, a flyer appeared in his mailbox. No stamp, no envelope, just bold letters. Local man revokes community lake access. Retaliation or power grab. Beneath it, a paragraph accusing him of using his position against the neighborhood. No signature, but Clarence didn't need one to know where it came from. When he walked Jasper down to the water that evening, he passed a couple standing by the shore with poles in the rocks. They didn't speak, just watched him walk by. Clarence went home, sat on the porch, let the sunset wash over him. He hadn't started a fight, but it was clear the neighborhood wasn't going to take kindly to being reminded that access was a privilege, not a guarantee. Thursday morning, a woman named Andrea Preston called, newly elected to the board. She said she wasn't there on Saturday, but she'd heard what happened. She wanted him to know Teresa didn't speak for everyone. Some of them were embarrassed. She mentioned talk of an emergency board meeting. Some members wanting to negotiate a new agreement. Clarence told her plainly he wasn't interested in negotiation, only respect. Andrea understood, but Clarence knew this wouldn't end with polite phone calls. By Friday, the HOA office was buzzing. His letter had been copied and passed around backyards, emailed across the subdivision, whispered about on walks. Every fishing club member had read it, and nobody was neutral. Inside the boardroom, Teresa stood with arms crossed, lips pressed tight. Ron told them Clarence was within his rights whether they liked it or not. An older member grumbled about being treated like trespassers. Andrea reminded them the agreement had expired. That was their fault. Teresa snapped that the lake had been part of their lives for decades. Kids swam there, families fished there. He couldn't just cut them off because his feelings were hurt. Ron shot back that it wasn't feelings, it was ownership, and it was her accusations that started this. The room fell quiet. Meanwhile, Clarence was back at the lake with a clipboard of his own, not patrolling, just taking inventory. Broken benches, trash scattered, fencing damaged. All of it the HOA's responsibility under the agreement. All of it neglected. A truck slowed behind him. Billy again, leaning out the window, asking if Clarence really wanted to poke the hornet's nest. Clarence didn't even look up. "I didn't poke anything," he said. "I just stopped letting people stomp through my yard without asking." That afternoon, a formal notice went out. Effective immediately. Access to Mayfield Lake suspended pending review. Residents told not to use the dock, the shoreline, the trails. Any violation could mean trespass enforcement. The reaction was instant. An older woman stormed into the office demanding answers. Teenagers argued with parents at the trailhead. Online forums exploded with rumors, one even claiming Clarence planned to sell the lake to developers. That night, Clarence sat on his porch again when Andrea stopped by in person. She kept her distance, respectful, and asked if he'd be willing to speak at the upcoming meeting. Clarence raised an eyebrow. "Say what?" She said. "Whatever you think they need to hear." She replied, "They don't know you, they only know Teresa's version." Clarence thought for a second, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll come." But agreeing to show up was one thing. Facing a room full of angry neighbors was something else entirely. The community room at Mayfield Hills filled up faster than anyone expected. Folding chairs were pulled from closets. Neighbors stood along the back wall and even outside the open doors. There hadn't been a turnout like this in years, not for budget talks, not even for pool renovations. But that evening, everyone wanted to hear what Clarence Rucker had to say. He stood near the front, off to the side, wearing jeans and a plain button-up shirt. No podium, no papers in hand. Just him, calm and watchful. Teresa sat dead center in the front row, her arms crossed tight, her jaw set like concrete. Behind her were faces Clarence recognized, some vaguely, some not at all. Most were quiet. A few avoided looking at him altogether. Ron Castile stepped up first and said, "Thanks for coming, everyone. I know this wasn't a scheduled meeting, but we felt it was important to address the concerns raised about lake access and recent events." He glanced toward Clarence, who gave a small nod. Ron cleared his throat and said, "Clarence Rucker has agreed to speak tonight. I'd ask that we all keep things respectful." Clarence stepped forward. He didn't speak right away. He looked around the room slowly, meeting eyes when he could. "My father used to bring me to this lake when I was 10, he began. "Before any of this neighborhood existed, we'd fish in the morning, cook on the shore in the afternoon. I learned how to tie my first line right here." A murmur ran through the crowd, a few heads tilted, people listened. "I bought the lake 3 years ago through a trust that honors his legacy. I kept access open to the community. No fees, no conditions, just expected folks to treat it with care. He paused. But when someone walks up to you, demands you leave, threatens to call the cops on your own property, that's not just about rules. That's about disrespect. A woman in the back spoke up. She didn't know who you were. Clarence looked at her. She didn't ask. There was a silence. No one tried to argue. Clarence went on. This isn't about punishing the community. It's about accountability. You've been using something that doesn't belong to you without maintaining it, without renewing the agreement, and at least from what I've seen, without even thinking about who's behind it. He stepped back, not trying to take the spotlight. I didn't want it to come to this, but I'm not going to apologize for asking to be treated like a person. That last sentence hit harder than he expected. A few people lowered their heads. One woman whispered to her husband. Then Teresa stood. Why didn't you just come to us? She asked, her voice tight. Why go straight to shutting everyone out? Clarence looked her straight in the eye. You came to me first, remember, on the dock with a clipboard and a threat. She opened her mouth to respond, but didn't. She sat back down slowly. Ron stepped forward. We're going to open discussion now. No shouting. Keep it constructive. Several hands shot up. An older man in a fishing hat said, I don't care who owns what. That lake is part of this neighborhood's life. Kids have grown up on it. Clarence replied evenly. Then maybe the neighborhood should care enough to respect the person who's kept it open all this time. Another woman asked, would you consider renewing the agreement if the HOA handled maintenance and put real guidelines in place? Clarence didn't answer right away. He could feel the weight in the room. They weren't just mad anymore. They were listening. I'll consider it, he said at last, but I'm not rushing. Not until I know folks understand that this isn't just land. It's personal. As the meeting wound down, Clarence knew one thing. Respect couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned. And he'd just made them all think about how little they'd offered. The following days were strangely quiet. No more flyers in Clarence's mailbox. No anonymous calls, no teenagers fishing behind the reeds without permission. The same lake that had stirred up so much noise just a week ago now reflected only trees and sky. Clarence didn't expect an apology from Teresa Holcomb, and he didn't get one. But she stepped back. No more accusations, no more standoffs. Word had it she'd resigned from the HOA board to focus on personal matters, though everyone knew why. On Saturday morning, Clarence returned to the dock with a toolbox and a bucket of paint. Jasper trotted beside him, tail wagging. The benches were still busted, the fencing still loose, but he wasn't bitter about it. He wanted to fix it. Not for the neighborhood, for himself, for his father. Midway through replacing a rotted wooden plank, he heard footsteps behind him. Need a hand? He turned. Andrea Preston stood there in jeans and sneakers, sleeves rolled up. She held a bag of screws and a cordless drill. Clarence nodded toward the bench. You know how to work that thing? I do, she grinned. You wouldn't believe how much HOA paperwork I fixed with this drill last year. He let out a low laugh and motioned to the broken bench. Be my guest. They worked quietly for a while. Andrea didn't fill the silence with small talk, which Clarence appreciated. After about 20 minutes, she finally spoke. You know, there's a lot of people in the neighborhood who want to make things right. Clarence didn't look up. Takes more than good intentions. I know, she said. That's why I've been talking to the new board. We're drafting a revised agreement, one that includes maintenance, cleanup schedules, and a rotating committee for oversight. He paused, then looked at her. No more clipboards and threats. No more, she promised, and any violations will be handled internally. You won't be bothered. Clarence nodded slowly. I'll read it when it's ready. Later that afternoon, another surprise came. Billy Waller returned, this time with his teenage grandson, Lucas. The kid held a trash bag in one hand and a pair of gloves in the other. We figured we'd help out a little, Billy said. Might not fix everything, but it's a start. Clarence didn't say much, just handed the boy a rake and pointed toward the trail, where broken glass had collected by the brush. By sundown, the dock looked new again. The benches were solid, the path was cleared, and for the first time since the whole mess started, Clarence felt something shift. Not just in the space around him, but in the people too. At church the next morning, a few heads turned when Clarence walked in. Some nodded politely. One woman leaned over and whispered, "That lake is lucky to have you." He thanked her even though he didn't know her name. After service, a man he didn't recognize approached him in the parking lot. Tall, balding, with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. "You're Clarence, right?" the man asked. "I live 2 streets down. I just wanted to say my kid caught his first fish at that lake last summer. I never got the chance to thank you for keeping it open." Clarence didn't need the thanks, but it meant something. Not just because it was sincere, but because it came without being forced. That night, as he walked Jasper along the trail, he thought back to his father again. The smell of fresh-cut grass, the sound of a reel spinning, the stillness of early morning water. His father used to say people don't always know the value of something until it's nearly gone. He understood that now more than ever. But Clarence also realized something deeper. Respect isn't handed out in letters or meetings. It's earned plank by plank, person by person, choice by choice. A week later, Clarence stood alone at the edge of Mayfield Lake. The air was cool, the water still, and the sunrise painted long streaks of orange across the surface. He hadn't brought his fishing rod this time. He didn't need it. He just stood quietly listening. Not to the birds or the breeze, but to the absence of noise. No shouting, no conflict. Just stillness. In a plastic folder under his arm was the revised access agreement. Andrea and the new board had worked hard on it. This time there were clear terms. Scheduled maintenance days, a 3-strike rule for littering, a mandatory renewal every 12 months, no automatic carryovers, no assumptions. Most importantly, every member of the HOA Fishing Club would now have to take a short orientation before being allowed to use the lake. Nothing fancy, just a reminder of the lake's history, of who owned it and what it stood for. Clarence didn't do it for control. He didn't even do it for the apology that never came. He did it because letting people walk all over something precious doesn't just damage the place. It changes how you see yourself. And Clarence wasn't about to let one woman's entitlement rewrite a legacy built over decades. Later that day, he returned to the neighborhood clubhouse where the new board waited for his signature. A few familiar faces were there, some friendly, some unsure, but none hostile. As Clarence signed the last page of the agreement, Andrea leaned in. "We're going to do better," she said. Clarence nodded. "I'll hold you to that." On the way out, he passed a small group of teenagers gathered near the bulletin board. They went quiet when they saw him, unsure of what to say. Then one of them, a lanky boy with a fishing hat too big for his head, stepped forward. "Mr. Rucker?" Clarence paused. "My dad told me you fixed the dock, said I should thank you." Clarence gave a small smile. "Just take care of it." "We will," the boy said quickly. "Promise." Walking back to his truck, Clarence felt something ease in his chest, the kind of peace that doesn't come from winning but from being understood, even if only a little. He thought again about that Saturday morning, about Teresa storming up with her clipboard, about how quickly she made up her mind about him. He hadn't yelled, hadn't pushed back with fire. He let the truth and the law speak for themselves, and in the end that was enough. The lake had taught him that sometimes the best way to earn respect isn't to demand it. It's to walk with it quietly, firmly, and let others catch up. And maybe, just maybe, by standing still you make enough noise for change. If you've ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you, where you were dismissed before anyone asked your name, remember this: silence doesn't mean weakness, and standing your ground with dignity speaks louder than any argument. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel. There's more where this came from. Real stories, human stories, lessons worth remembering.